Good morning, everyone. My name is Vijai Simha, and I'm probably one of the few people from the academia here. Although my background is largely in the industry, after around 25 years of working in corporate roles, I've moved to the academia. And the talk today is more about the Matter protocol. How many of you have heard about Matter protocol? How many of you are familiar with this? Okay, a smaller set. So good that I planned this as an introductory session, and it's more of a call to action rather than anything else. So the intent is to sort of introduce the protocol called Matter and why should we actually look at it, and why I'm talking about this to a set of people who are deep into the Wi-Fi protocol. So before I get to this, I have a daughter who is now in the 10th grade. She's having her summer vacations right now. I thought I'll sort of take some help in making some presentations and all those kind of things. So I asked her, can you help me in preparing some matter for a talk that I'm going to have on whether matter really matters. She said, Appa, you're going to speak in Wi-Fi Knowledge Summit. Does it really matter to them whether matter really matters? I said whether it matters to them or not, it matters to people who matter to me, which is Shrikant and Devdas. So I'm anyway going to talk, right? So I come from an IoT background. My primary focus over the past 8 years has been in IoT. Before that, I was into ADSL, VDSL, and Android and those kind of things. One of the things that has happened in the IoT space over the past 8 years is that it has sort of not lived up to the expectations that we had. There were a lot of expectations that we had when it suddenly became a in thing around 2014-15, which is when I started, right? But for whatever reasons, right, I'll probably talk about why those things have happened and why I feel Matter is probably the direction for solving those problems, right? So there was a lot of talk about 50 billion devices by 2020 and all those kind of things. We are nowhere close to it, right? So this is last year's data, 2023, I think. We are still somewhere around 17 or so. And what I want you to notice is the part here, the lower part, which is essentially the wireless personal area networks, right? A large part of this is your BLE devices, right? And we still have a lot of problem because of that, right? Yes, we are having a large number of devices, but I would still think it is not in the way we would want the IoT world to evolve, right? Because a few device types have hogged the limelight. You have your smartwatches and a few other devices. It has not spread. It is very, very narrow set of devices that have actually become prominent, and it has not been the kind of thought that we had, saying that we'll have a smart home where a lot of smart devices will talk to each other and we'll have a much more easier way of working. That has not happened, right? And the reason why I feel that has not happened is primarily two reasons, in my opinion. One is the communication protocols probably being the weakest link in the entire thing, right? And second, fragmentation in the industry as such, right? And I believe Matter addresses these two, right? And that's what I'll probably speak to you on, right? This is the typical problem that we'll have in any communication or any standards kind of a body, and we have seen this, right? We have seen n number of situations where we have had a lot of communication protocols, starting from your NB-IoT to LoRa to Sigfox to Dash 7. Every communication protocol wanted to sort of solve the problem, and you just have another protocol, right? So what was very important was to have something a bit more unifying, something that would actually say, okay, let me not replace the previous protocols, let me see if I can integrate them, right? And I think that is where Matter is going. And My hypothesis is this, that Matter is probably the primary or the best possible candidate at this point of time for us to move to this point where we have some semblance of interoperability within the smart home, right? As of now, we don't have it at all. And one of the reasons why I emphasized on the BLE devices is that there is a fundamental problem with the BLE device, right? In fact, I don't even consider that as an IoT device, because for a IoT device, the key thing is the internet, and BLE doesn't support IP. So why are we talking about BLE device and IoT device? It's not, right? And any device that is not on the internet, it's so hard to discover, right? You can't actually, you can have only one-way communication only when there is a smartphone in the middle, right? You have a huge number of occasions where you are not able to reach, right? We were trying to sort of build a cold chain communication system for a medical diagnostics company, right? And one of the biggest issues that we had was that the temperature trackers were sort of connected over BLE to the person who was actually carrying, and there were huge number of occasions where the phone just refused to sort of act as a gateway, because anyway the phone is not designed to be a gateway, right? A gateway needs to be an always-on kind of a device. So that created a huge amount of problems. So even though there is 17 billion there, right? I don't think that is actually IoT, because a large part of that is BLE, right? Now, how does Matter help? Okay, I'll come back to this. So Matter helps by bringing in a IP-based network protocol, right? And that is my biggest pitch in terms of why Matter matters, right? So one of the key things that it actually brings in is, along with Thread and 802.15.4, which is what I'll talk about, Matter brings in a way in which you can use the same kind of SOCs that you were using for BLE, but get a IP-driven kind of an ecosystem. I think that's the key difference. The other big thing is about fragmentation in the industry. And for the first time, I am seeing all the big wigs, right? You have Amazon, you have Apple, Google, Samsung Smart Things, right? LG, a huge number of entities subscribing to Matter. For me, that is big, because we have seen over so many years that however good the communication protocol is, if there is no sufficient support from the industry, right, you have no way that the protocol will actually take off. So for once, I am seeing a lot of support from the industry. These are all companies that are not only promoters, they are actually companies that have actually brought products into the market, right? CES 2024, Amazon launched quite a few number of devices. They have been pushing Matter into almost every other Echo device that they have, which is millions of devices all at once. Many of those Echo devices are actually hubs, which means that you can actually leverage those devices that you already have to be used as Matter hubs, right? Now, this is on the industry side in terms of the products and the ecosystems. Many of these things are actually ecosystems, right? HomeKit and Amazon, these are all ecosystems. How does the developer side look? Do I have enough? Yes. The other side is, how does it look for people like you and me who want to develop products, right? It's a pretty rosy picture there, because almost everyone who matters there, which is Nordic, Silicon Labs, TI, ST, right? Almost all of them are on the bandwagon, right? So you have a huge number of SOC developers, right, who not only support Matter and Thread, but they also have SDKs available, right? What does that mean? It means that you can actually just get started, put a few things together, and then you have a set of devices that are up and running. And most of these devices will, by and large, use the same kind of energy that your BLE devices would actually take. Most of the devices that are here are planned for that kind of S1. Home Assistant is again an ecosystem. It's I don't know if you are familiar with, how many of you have used Home Assistant at home? So it's actually a platform, it's an open source platform which you can run on a Raspberry Pi, and you can use that as a way of connecting all the smart devices that you have at your home, right? So it's actually a platform for making your home smarter, right? And that itself is an open source platform, which also has a lot of API integrations, which means that it connects to a lot of other ecosystems. And now they are actually, they have baked in Matter support into them, which means that you have significantly higher support for Home Assistant plus Matter being used in. So that's a key thing. And Tuya, I don't know if you are familiar, it's an entity that actually does a lot of devices that you can actually white brand, right? So it's more of an enabler. You have a lot of consumer electronics companies which actually take devices that are made by Tuya, put their brand on top of that, and then they sell, right? So from that perspective, Tuya is actually not one vendor, but a set of vendors who we are actually talking about, right? Arduino was missing till around 6 months, but now we have Matter baked into the Arduino SDKs that you have. So in fact, they are coming out with a separate Arduino board called Arduino Nano Matter, right? Which has this, and many of the Arduino boards that you nowadays use for your Edge ML use cases, Tiny ML use cases, does provide support for Matter, right? Again, I don't sort of believe that the Arduino Uno that is very popular in the schools is the kind of things that we would use, but there are a lot of other Arduino boards which are almost industry grade, right? Industry grade modules provide support for Matter already. So what are the key differentiating features here? One, it is natively IP based, which means that at the physical and the MAC layer, you have 802.15.4 in many of the cases, right? On top of that, you have Thread, which actually provides 6LoWPAN, and UDP as the one, and on top of that, you have Matter sitting in. So fundamentally, it is IP based networking. It is open source. Matter specification as well as the stack is open source. In fact, it started as an open source project. So it is significantly easier for you to get started. It is largely community driven. In fact, it is one of those things where the open source implementation comes first and then goes to the specification. What I've seen in many other things is that you have the specification, but then the open source implementation has a significant lag, right? That I don't see it here. Setup and commissioning. In my opinion, after after IP-based networking not being there, and the fact that fragmentation is an issue, the next biggest issue is commissioning, right? How do you set up an IoT device? In fact, one fun fact was that around 8 years back, I was speaking to one of the largest refrigerator manufacturing companies in the world, and they said that they have sold so many Wi-Fi refrigerators, but only 3 of them are actually sending data. 3% of them are actually sending data. What does that mean? 97% of their customers spent extra money for a connected refrigerator, but didn't bother to connect. Why did that happen? That is because it is painful to connect, right? Or they don't have the kind of whatever technical one is needed to sort of connect it, right? So setup and commissioning is one of the most important thing, but those are the things that developers typically tend to sort of ignore. So this provides a simplified setup and commissioning. You can do it using QR code, you can do it using NFC, you can do it using BLE, right? All 3 possibilities are there. And there is also a security layer that is actually built in. You have something called as distributed compliance ledger, which is a mix of blockchain that actually comes into this. So every device has some kind of an identity. So when you onboard the device, right, it actually creates a significantly better identity and security kind of a layer that you actually create. It has something called as multi-admin, which is a very interesting feature because within your homes, you will have multiple people who belong to multiple ecosystems. Some of us are Apple guys, some of us are Amazon guys. So you'll have within the same house, you'll have 2 or 3 ecosystems existing. And again, within an Indian context, we are not very religious about sticking to one ecosystem. We just buy whatever makes sense, right? So multi-admin feature becomes important because this is one way in which every device that is there will get a different certificate, or what is called as an NOC, which is specific to each ecosystem, which means that the same device can be operated through an Apple-based ecosystem as well as an Amazon-based ecosystem, which means that for Apple and Amazon, it is not a question of 0 or 1. It is not about, okay, is this device in my ecosystem or it is in the other ecosystem. It can be a combination, right? And that reduces the friction that manufacturers have. There is also something called as local communication, which means, let's say I buy a device, right? It is connected to the cloud. What happens 3 years down the line if that company goes bust, right? So what happens when the cloud connectivity is not there? So one of the things that has been built in within Matter is that you have a way in which the devices can talk to each other locally, even when the cloud connectivity is not there. Yeah, you'll not be able to do remote monitoring and all those kind of things, but the entire system will function. So the home as a system will actually function, even when you don't have it. And this essentially means that you have a federated kind of a system. You don't have a single point of failure, right? Typically your routers will be your single point of failure, right? So here this avoids that kind of a situation where you have a single point of failure. And anyway, Matter in many cases sits on top of Thread, which again is a mesh networking protocol, which sort of reduces that risk, right? So the other part is on the low cost, sleepy end device kind of a support, which is what most of the IoT devices are. And a typical stack, which includes Matter, Thread, and 802.15.4 is almost as optimal as a BLE kind of a device, right? And that will help me sort of run my devices on a coin cell battery for probably a few years, right? Which is what is the key thing in IoT. Support for legacy devices, there are what are called as Matter bridges, where an existing device, if it is on Zigbee, or you have existing devices that are on BLE, you can have intermediate Matter bridges which represent those devices. So it means that you can actually connect existing devices also. So it's not something that you will say this works only for completely new set of devices. For brownfield devices also this works. How are we doing on time? Okay, so I'll probably skip this because there are very similar response. So currently Matter works on Ethernet, Wi-Fi, and Thread. And below Thread you have 802.15.4, and you have your standard IPv6 mode. Although for Thread and other things you will probably be using 6LoWPAN. And on the transport layer, you either have TCP or you have UDP, and some parts of TCP will come in what is called as message reliability protocol. And then you use BTP, which is largely for commissioning, right? You use BLE for commissioning the devices, and then you start. And then there is a set of things that are there on the application layer that you can actually use, where the data model, where the data structures, the interaction model, those things are all defined, right? It's almost a 1,000-page document that you have as the Matter specification. But the fact is that you have each and every kind of device that you can actually use specified in this, and the interactions are actually specified, right? So that creates a very good structure for you to create a device that you can have as part of your smart home. So I'll run through this, but the key thing that I want to emphasize is that there are a large number of device types that are being supported now, right? Almost every 6 months you have a new version that has actually come out. The first time I heard was sometime in January or February 2020, when a set of people from Mindtree said that there is something called as Project Chip that has started, right? It was essentially done by the Zigbee Alliance. So even now the GitHub repository that you will see is actually called Project Chip, which is connected home over IP. So the foundation has been about connecting your devices in your home over IP, right? That's the is one. And there are a huge number of devices that have come. Last week there was a release where a large number of devices, and what I feel is important is what is called as scene support, where different scenes in the home, where you have multiple smart connected devices talking to each other in a collaborative manner, right? That is enabled through what is called as scenes support, right? Energy monitoring, right? TV, CES 2024, Amazon launched. Okay, I'll come to that question. This one. So Matter or Wi-Fi is something that is quite obvious. It is something that is probably the biggest use case that you will have in this one, because almost all homes nowadays have Wi-Fi, right? And with Wi-Fi just supporting the layer 1, 2 and 3, you now have Matter supporting the higher layers. So together you have a more effective full stack availability, which was the key advantage that Bluetooth and Zigbee had, because they were full stack solutions, right? Both Bluetooth and or BLE and Zigbee were full stack solutions, and that was one of the key reasons that people were using them, right? Apart from them being very optimal in terms of memory as well as cycles, right? The same thing you can do it now with Matter. These things we have talked about. One thing that I want to sort of explore is the possibility of using Matter over Halo, which will sort of increase the range, right? I believe right now the focus for Matter is a smart home, but it is now moving to smart buildings next, right? And I see some traction within the CSA, which is the alliance that drives this, about smart industrial ones as well. And that is where I think Matter over Halo will actually come in. I hope somebody in this audience is looking at Halo, and if they are looking at Halo, then Matter plus Halo is a wonderful combination. Matter casting runs on Wi-Fi. So this got announced in CES 2024, and this is an alternative to your Chromecast and your AirPlay, right? So you are essentially running a high bandwidth kind of application layer protocol on top of Wi-Fi, right, in your home, and you are creating AS1. And I guess, I don't know about this, but I guess this will be running quick and HTTP3, right, which moves it towards web transport, which uses UDP and makes it much better than using TCP and other things for all your S1. So I would expect this to be much more optimal than the other competing protocols that we have. It also supports 1.3 features, where you have ways in which you can send messages from each of your devices. So let's say your water meter or your energy meter can actually send a message to your TV saying that there is too much consumption that's happening on this one, and you get that as a message on your TV. So those kind of casting features are now possible with 1.3. So this is something that I feel is something that is interesting. I am done. So not everything is hunky-dory. Interoperability issues will always be there, but I think it is a good start that has been made, and I hope if we have a lot of support from the user community, Matter will probably become very S1. I'll probably not spend too much time on this, but what I'm planning to do is to set up something called as a Matter meetup at Atria University, where we are trying to build a platform for interactions between industry, academia, and as well as researchers. So we probably want to start with the first Matter meetup on June 29th. Probably a one-day workshop on Matter protocol, where we can take some hardware and then play around with it. So if you're interested, you can reach out to me either here or directly on the Atria University website. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Vijay. I think we can take a couple of questions. I'll switch the presentation. So raise your hand. Mike will come to you.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. And great you're doing that workshop. One question is, because it's full stack, is there like some provision for identity of that end device?
Yes,
So because if I connect as a HVAC device, but is there a way for me to know for sure that it is what it's saying?
There are two ways in which you can actually build in identity. One is the fact that it is IPv6, and the moment you have IPv6, you have a full-fledged identity that actually comes with the IPv6 address. In addition to that, you have the DCL, which is the blockchain layer, which actually brings in additional identity.
That's in that distributed compliance.
Yes.
Okay.
The ledger.
I see.
Sir,
Cool.
here.
Thank you.
So just wanted to add a comment or share my thought. So can we consider Matter is what Android was to mobile phone 15 years back, right? So when there were different kinds of OSs running, like a Symbian OS or a BlackBerry OS,
You can say so.
right? So I mean, just for the ease of understanding for others who might like an analogy.
You can say so. My only thing is it's probably better because Android was pushed by around 2 or 3 primary players, right?
Okay.
I think it's more distributed here.
Yeah, and just one point is like usually Apple, for that matter, right, strives on building their own ecosystem.
Yes.
Now, do we see a scare that they might run away from this
I
a few
think there
years
is
down the lane?
I think there is a sense in the industry that no one ecosystem is actually grabbing the entire market share. So there is a tendency for people to sort of collaborate, and that's where I think Matter is coming. But at the same time, we also have a situation where one or two entities stopped their Matter. For example, Belkin, I think they stopped their Matter primarily because one of the biggest issues is that when you have these kind of things, differentiation becomes difficult, right? And commoditization happens. Now, because commoditization has happened, the cost of these devices have come down, which is good for the users, but not so good for the manufacturer. So Belkin has actually moved out because of that reason.
Last one question. Chris, please. Vijay, can I get the pointer?
Yes.
You can answer the question. Just one. That lady there, yeah. Who has the mic?
So there was a mention about matter over thread being very low power and ideal for an IoT device.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about matter over Wi-Fi for an end device, which is like maybe battery operated?
Matter or Wi-Fi is going to be significantly more energy consuming than over thread. But with some of the new devices that are actually coming in, there are a lot of people who are trying to use Wi-Fi devices, especially the espressive modules, right, in home kind of use cases. But there is no doubt that the power consumption is significantly higher in Wi-Fi, which is where I am hoping for Halo to come in.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Thank you, Vijay.